All right, friends, I'm the Kodiak. Welcome in. And before we get started, I just want to say that this is my new cat. So I just got a new cat. His name is Caesar since he was found near the strip since I live in Vegas. So yeah, say hi to everybody. Okay. Um, Now it is time for us to talk about where I think teams are going to finish in 2024 in ranking the offenses 1 through 32. Um, Here are my main considerations. So QB1, and the reason I put projected here is because obviously you never know what could happen in training camp, and I didn't want to put that juju of labeling someone as QB1 or a backup. Um, I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. So yeah, PFF offensive line ranking. I actually didn't really take that into account when I was ranking the team's passing offense, but I probably should have. I didn't even add that until the end of the video, or until I was done with all my rankings. So yeah, uh, another thing, offensive play caller. There are a lot of unknowns with this and in this regard, but um, I did try to take into account the teams who we think will be calling the plays because there are a few teams, as you're going to see, where we're not entirely sure yet. And then I also did weapons, and I included the order I think they'll finish with in target share because that's pretty indicative as to how important they are relatively to their team's offense. So we have 6 tiers: iron, bronze, mid, silver, gold, and platinum. And the tiering matters more than the raw rank, but you'll see in particular, I do have a massive tier right in the middle. And I did still rank in order of my preferences. So with that, we are going to start with the Giants in Iron Tier. And if I don't do it enough on this channel, I don't think the Giants get enough credit for how awful they've been over the past 7 years. I've called them the new Browns. I called out Joe Shane for defending Daniel Jones so vehemently on Hard Knocks. And also, I added passing yards per game and passing touchdowns in 2023, both. But those are just mainly for you. I could care less about those. Those do not factor into my rankings at all. I very strongly discourage looking at the box score, but I have that there just in case you guys want to. Um, but I have that in there just for reference. So our projected, obviously, you know who the quarterback is of this team, and there has never been so many excuses for bad play as there has been for Daniel Jones over the past 5 years of his career. And he just, besides the wild card game in 2022, there has never been a point where I've just been like, yeah, this pick not only made sense, but he is somebody who I feel good about going forward for the New York Giants. And their hands were kind of tied, but they did sign him to a 4-year, $40 million a year contract, which is just absolutely ludicrous and absolutely embarrassing. But the backup behind him, Drew Lock, you saw what he did last year on primetime against the Eagles. You know that if he steps in, he is capable of taking over. He's not going to just completely implode. And honestly, I could see Locke getting a few starts this year if Jones struggles, and because Dable and Shane are coaching for their jobs, are coaching and managing for their jobs. So bad offensive line, bad quarterback, bad weapons outside of Malik Neighbors, who was a great pick by them. I really like what he offers, and I really like what he offers as a wide receiver one. The problem is he is going to have to ride out the early bumps. Like, I see best case scenario 800, 900 yards his rookie year, but that might come along with 8, 9 touchdowns, so we'll see. And if you're going to draft Neighbors in fantasy, just remember that, this offense could be very bad. So he's probably not someone I would take in a lineup league where you have to determine when you start and when you sit. But in best ball, it's completely fine. But behind him, you have some nice pieces. Like Wandale is somebody who I've kind of been pleasantly surprised with in the NFL. Slayton, Hyatt, and Bellinger after Waller retired. So yeah, that is the New York Giants. Now let's talk about the Jets. Um, I'm really not big on the Jets just because I don't understand why everybody is expecting 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who is running an offense alongside Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing, and Carter, to be legitimately anything of substance. They aren't going to score a lot. You already know that the Jets' defense is pretty good, so they're not going to be in shootouts either. Um, and the only times they've done really well consistently over the past 2 years is when they've handed the ball off to Brees Hall. Brees Hall is pretty much the only situation-proof Jet there is, and considering how bad their offensive line was last year, it was really remarkable what he was able to do. So yeah, Rodgers is going to come back, but again, I think your expectations for the Jets need to be very, very low. especially because of the coaching. Uh, Rodgers, I don't know. I just don't understand why people are talking about him as if he's the same quarterback. He's cooked, and I don't know who the backup's going to be. It's either going to be Tyrod Taylor or Jordan Travis. I could see them rolling with Tyrod Taylor just because he's the more experienced option, but um, luckily they're not going to do anything they did last year, like throw out Tim Boyle. Um, PFF offensive PFF offensive line rankings, excuse me, fifth. And I'm not going to give my comments about offensive line rankings because I'm not that much of an expert when it comes to the O line. But what I will say is that fifth for this team is absolutely laughable. If Smith gets hurt, if you know Fashanu goes down, then they have absolutely no depth. And I don't know. I just thought fifth was very, very rich, especially considering all the new faces. And they do get Vera Tucker back, but again, are you going to expect him to be great right off the bat? I don't know. But yeah, Garrett Wilson, he's obviously somebody who has been absolutely great to this point in his career. But the sad thing is, for the duration of his rookie contract, the Jets still don't have a path to an elite quarterback. So unfortunately, I do believe he's going to be a what could have been. They did add Mike Williams though, probably the best wide receiver too that we've seen in the Jets in a Jets uniform in a while, and that includes Corey Davis. Um, yeah, so Conklin, Malachi Corley, and Gibson played very well for them last year. Malachi Corley in particular is somebody I really like. I think he's going to be good with these new kickoff rules. So yeah, and the X factor is Aaron Rodgers cooked? I already gave my thoughts about that. 30, Carolina Panthers. So this is an offense where I could see it working, mainly because Dave Canales took a Buccaneers offense last year where nobody expected anything. And Baker Mayfield had a career year. He had a resurgent year, and he got a contract, so good for him, especially for someone like me who's always been a fan of Baker Mayfield. This Panthers team really, really struggled last year. They had a bad offensive line. They didn't have any weapons of legitimacy. And the depth behind this roster really, really shows out in how much they overpaid to get Bryce Young. I don't necessarily disagree with the process of getting a guy like Bryce Young, but it was about as disastrous as a season as you could have had, considering you could have had Caleb Williams, assuming everything doesn't go to par like it did last year. But I don't know. NFL is like a domino effect league, so who even knows if that happens? But uh, as far as what I'm expecting from Bryce Young, there is a lot of cause for concern. I'm not pushing the panic button yet, but you cannot be concerned or you cannot be thrilled with what you saw last year. But you can't really be concerned or thrilled with what you saw last year from anybody on Carolina. So, to be completely honest, last year it's kind of a wash for Bryce Young. Or I'm not going to say it's a wash because it's not like Trevor Lawrence's rookie year where he was dealing with the worst head coach ever. Granted, Reich was out of his league and is not going to find another coaching job anytime soon. But I don't know. It still just wasn't working for Carolina last year. Their defense, it was all right. It was actually pretty good relative to what they had to do. We knew in Denver that Ejiro Evero is the man. But yeah, so Bryce Young and Andy Dalton. And who they're going to be throwing to is Deontay Johnson. Actually a pretty good addition to this Panthers team. And they did sign a few guys in free agency, so they did do their best to bolster the offensive line. Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, I forgot a column between those two, pardon me. Jonathan Mingo, and Jonathan Brooks. So with a few of these guys, like Thielen, I think he just completely got empty calories, garbage time stats. I really didn't think he was that great on film last year. Legette and Mingo are two guys where my expectations for them, they are in the gutter. Didn't like either of them as prospects, thought they had really bad profiles, but Brooks is someone that's interesting to me. I do think he's going to be better than what they've had back there with Hubbard. And yeah, so our X factor is how is Canales? Is he going to make this passing game respectable? I think he can. I really think he can. Let's take a hydration break. Let me put on my chapstick as well. Okay, so 29th, we're talking about the Commanders here. And the one concern I have with the Commanders is that Jaden Daniels, we don't have that much info on him as a passer. Yes, we do have his, season at LSU where he was absolutely incredible, but that was one season. We don't really have an extended uh, period of time that inspires confidence as to what Jaden Daniels is going to be in the NFL. And I'm really concerned with Cliff Kingsbury becoming the offensive coordinator. And if Kingsbury has improved as an offensive coordinator, it's going to be a lot better for the Commanders, and maybe they're going to smash my expectations. But still, we've got Daniels and Mariota backing him up. 27th offensive line ranking feels weird because usually I feel like the Commanders have a good offensive line, but ultimately, ever since they lost Trent Williams, it's just been, downhill from there. But Cliff Kingsbury running this offense, I don't really know what it's going to look like. I don't know if they're going to do air raid. I think that'd be really bizarre if they went with that, just based on the personnel they have. I mean, yeah, Jaden Daniels is a mobile quarterback, but still, I don't think you can run the Arizona air raid scheme. I think the receivers are too tall for that because they don't have just like 18 5'8" wide receivers like Arizona did when Cliff Kingsbury was their offensive coordinator. But the weapons are pretty respectable. You have Terry McLaurin, who might be one of the biggest what could have beens in NFL history. And if I'm Terry McLaurin, what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot more complaining because he is just way too good of a dude, and I feel so bad for him that he's in his fifth, sixth year. I believe sixth year now, which, oh good lord, that makes me feel old. Um, but yeah, and it really hasn't materialized. He has never hit his ceiling, and he may be a player where the best year of his career was his rookie one. Jahan Dotson, you cannot, based on what you saw last year, anything you get from him is gravy. Last year it was just an annoying stretch and a bad offense. So I don't know. I hope he has another year. I hope he has a good year this year, but if not, panic button time. And they did add Luke McCaffrey and Ben Sinnott. That inspires a lot of confidence in me. And Adam Peters, he added like a million guys this offseason. I believe they also added Zach Ertz, but I did not put that as one of my priority weapons. 36-year-old Zach Ertz. Last time he played was 2 years ago. Yeah, no. But they also do have De'Ami Brown and Austin Eckler. He was a decent addition. So, yeah, has Cliff Kingsbury improved as an offense coordinator? That's going to be the biggest question mark with the Commanders. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad unit. It's just unproven with Daniels. And speaking of unproven, now we are at the bronze tier. We have the Tennessee Titans. And what separates the Titans from the Commanders, in my opinion, is I just think the supporting cast for the Titans is more complete. Um, and this year for the Titans is largely dependent on if Levis can take that next step forward. Because if he can take that next step forward, then this team could very well compete for a division title. Yeah, and that includes a very tough AFC South. That division is better than it's been in a long time, with these freak quarterbacks like Stroud and A-Rich. And the reason why I'm not confident in Levis yet, I actually have a video on my channel saying Will Levis will not succeed as an NFL quarterback, is because I was not very encouraged with what I saw on film at Kentucky, and I definitely wasn't encouraged with what I saw last year. But again, you can kind of make some excuse for him, like he had a really really bad O line, like oh I forget who they threw out at left tackle last year, but his name is skipping my head. I know I'm gonna remember this while I'm editing it, and I'm gonna be kicking myself. But you all know who it was, and you all know that it just wasn't a pretty sight. But so we've got Levis and we've got Rudolph backing him up. PFF offensive line rank 30th. I thought that was a little tough considering they did add Cushionberry in free agency, and they did add Latham in the draft, but Brian Callahan, this is his first chance at running an offense because Zach Taylor was the play caller in Cincinnati, but Callahan was pretty important as far as, the week to week operations of the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll see how this goes. And they did everything they could to surround Levis with quality talent. They did pay up for Calvin Ridley in this past free agency. They also added DeAndre Hopkins the previous year and Tyler Boyd. Chigozie Okonkwo is a guy they drafted in the 4th round in 2022 that I really like. Unfortunately, he did not have that great of a year last year, but neither did anybody else on the Titans. So another one, Tajay Spears, he's probably going to be the receiving back. Same with Tony Pollard getting the first and second down work. They did sign Pollard to a 3-year, $24 million contract in free agency. Obviously, our X factor is, does Levis take a step forward? Now, here we go with the Broncos. So the projected QB1 for the Broncos is Bo Nix. I just don't see how Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson end up starting week 1. And if Nix cannot start week 1, especially after being a 24-year-old rookie with 5 years of college experience under his belt, that's not good whatsoever. But this is a team whose offensive line played relatively well last year. There's a lot of stats that do not favor the offensive line, but a lot of those are due to the fact that you have Russell Wilson back there at quarterback, and the dude is just a sack machine. So I am willing to give them a pass. And honestly, there were a few games where they played pretty well, but for the most part, the run game really struggled to get going. And if Russell Wilson wasn't throwing miracle balls to Courtland Sutton, this team offensively was just absolutely anemic. But I think it could be better than people think, mainly because Bo Nix's experience meshed with Sean Payton's scheme. It feels like a match made in heaven. It feels like something that they want to do. And with Sutton, Mims, Reynolds, Patrick, and Dulcich, and or Lucas Kroll, that's a decent group of weapons. I don't think it's as bad as, oh my god, I completely forgot to mention Troy Franklin. My bad. But it's not as bad as it was coming into the offseason. I actually thought the Broncos group of weapons and roster in general was pretty laughable, but last year they really struggled to establish the run, and I think that this team, if they want to win in 2024, it's largely going to be dependent on how they can establish the run. Javonte Williams did not look like his former self past last year, and Jaleel McLaughlin looked very explosive. They did add Audric Estime, and they did add Blake Watson as well. Samaje Perine another name to keep track of. I don't know if they're going to keep 4 running backs. That'd be definitely bold if they did, but I could see it. And yeah, overall, I just think that this passing offense could be better than people think, but ultimately, another one that's just kind of unproven. So, yeah, we'll just see where we go from there. Now, another one that is pretty unproven, not at, weapons. I mean, yeah, they did draft a rookie, but as far as play caller and quarterback is the Raiders. So this team ended the year very strong on the backs of their defense, but Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. Aiden O'Connell right now is the leader in the clubhouse to be the QB1 for the Raiders, and this team looked a lot better. It looked night and day compared to last year when Jimmy Garoppolo was in and when Aiden O'Connell was in. Aiden O'Connell, it kind of felt like Brock Purdy all over again in 2022, where, Jimmy Garoppolo was the starter for the 49ers, then Brock Purdy comes in and, just completely blows the daylights out of him. But this is a team with a pretty good offensive line, or at least I would rank them a lot better than 19th. But Getsy is coming from Chicago. You don't really know what he offers because Fields was such a limited quarterback. Oh, my cat's meowing right now. Yeah, sorry about that. But so if you are going to build an offense that has a relatively, I don't know how you put it. If you're going to build one that has a young quarterback that you're going to try to support, at least for now, then this is about as good a supporting cast as you could have hoped for if you're Aiden O'Connell, because you have Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers. They drafted Brock Bowers 13th overall, which caught me off guard because I was like, you have Mayer, why would you draft Bowers? But yeah, they also have Trey Tucker, so yeah. And I expect the QB room to be a little shaky. I expect the QB play to be a little up and down. But ultimately, I do think this team will make the playoffs again. And yeah, their offense is the one concern I have about their team. Their defense, I think they can keep up the hot hand of how they ended last year. So the Patriots, number 25. And Brissett currently is the Vegas odds favorite to start week 1, and that very well could happen. But ultimately, I think Drake May is who is going to end up taking most of the snaps for the Patriots in 2024. Whether he gets in week 3, week 4, week 5, I don't expect it to be long before we see Drake May on the field. He's just that talented. So this is a team that Bill Belichick did not do a good job of building their offensive philosophy. He did not do a good job of building offensive personnel, offensive staff, and they did acquire Alex Van Pelt. They did sign Alex Van Pelt to be their offensive coordinator. Came over from Cleveland. Still a relatively weak offensive line, which is why I'm kind of tempering my expectations with this team. But if you're a Patriots fan, this is something you haven't had in a while because you actually have real skill position guys now. Long gone are the days of paying up for guys like Nelson Aguilar and Jonnu Smith. And I know Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry are still there, but they still have relatively bad contracts. But oh yeah, Devontae Parker too. But yeah, the skill position overhaul just makes me feel a lot better about this Patriots team. So with Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry, Jalen Polk, Baker, and Mondre, this offense has become underratedly crowded. So yeah, uh, still a young team, still one that might need some time to gel. But yeah. And then we get into the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is a team where I could see them being a pretty good offense. I could see the offense being, very, very respectable and them just playing classic Steeler football, like run the ball with Warren and Najee and play good defense. But Russell Wilson, I mean, he's just so limited. I know he calls himself Mr. Unlimited, but my God, as a Broncos fan, I wanted to like the dude. I do like the dude as a person. Don't get me wrong. None of my gripes with Russell Wilson have anything to do with how he was as a human. He is a class act on and off the field. But on the field, oh my goodness. As far as how he was as a quarterback, he is mind-bogglingly frustrating to watch because it's either play action, uh, it's either a QB scramble, a check down, or a deep ball or a sack. Like that is literally Russell Wilson. Like it's a 4-5 true outcome game when you're watching Russell Wilson play quarterback. But he did go to a Steelers team that has improved their offensive line, and Arthur Smith, he has had success with Tennessee in the past. Didn't have success in Atlanta, but maybe some guys just aren't ready for the big chair. And we're going to see a lot of Russell Wilson deep balls to George Pickens. And honestly, for those of us who have been dying in the desert to see George Pickens pop off and go crazy, this might be as good a quarterback as any because Pickens is definitely going to get his shots downfield. So yeah, I'm excited about that. But George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Roman Wilson, who they just drafted in the third round, those are going to be their main receiving options. And I know they do have guys like Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson, but those are the three that I'm mainly expecting to get the lion's share of, the work. And Jalen Warren and Najee Harris are two running backs who I really like. I really like the tandem. I just think they complement each other so well. Najee Harris, he's not exciting, but he's very safe. And Jalen Warren is just the receiver. He breaks a bunch of tackles. He's explosive. A lot more exciting than Najee Harris, and definitely the better running back. But yeah, so as far as what concerns me and what can make or break this team, new faces at QB and OC. What happens if Fields has to go in there and you're pairing him up with an Arthur Smith offense? Does it look like Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota with Atlanta all over again? I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, now we're in the mid tier, and the Saints. This was a weird team last year because I honestly thought the Saints were not that good. They do profile very well in most underlying metrics, but at the same time, you know what? I'm going to scoot my mic closer to me. They do profile very well in most underlying metrics, but man, for those of you who watched the New Orleans Saints last year, you know that it was rough. Some games looked very, very rough. And a large part of why it looked rough was because of their QB1, Derek Carr, who, once again, they overpaid, not performing in the way that we know Derek Carr can, and he's in the twilight of his career. His best days are definitely behind him as a quarterback. And with them drafting Spencer Rattler, I believe in the 5th round, I could see Spencer Rattler getting some game time. Same with Hayner, who I believe they took in the 4th in 2023. But yeah, and this I was surprised to see this because I feel like the Saints have always had a good offensive line, but now that I think about it, and Ramczyk is probably going to miss the whole year. Not really sure what's going on there. I hope, for the sake of him, he gets better, but uh, you never know. Lower body injuries, chronic lower body injuries, like I believe he was dealing with arthritis or uh, I don't know, cartilage in his knee, which is something that my favorite hockey team's captain is currently going through. Uh, you know that it's a long road to recovery, and there were rumors that he could medically retire, which is very scary. But I don't know. Uh, yeah. So this team, they're getting a new offensive philosophy for the first time forever. Pete Carmichael and Joe Lombardi, those days of those guys being your offensive coordinator are over. The good thing that the Saints have going for them is very good weapons. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Jawan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Cedric Wilson, A.T. Perry. That's a pretty solid group. And honestly, why I think I have the Saints a tier above a bunch of the teams that I have in the bronze tier. Because, yes, I do not have faith in Derek Carr anymore. But with the weapons they have, like, I don't know, Olave is one of the game's transcendent young wide receivers. And Rashid Shaheed really came out of nowhere, but he's really developed as a route runner. And I look forward to seeing more of him on the field this year, and I hope he completes his game because that'd be fantastic. But my question for this team is how long of a leash does Derek Carr have? So now we're getting into the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team that honestly should have been better last year, but there was a market correction on Geno Smith. He had a great year in 2022. He at least had a great, first half of the year. Second half of the year, he regressed, but he still had a good year. And then last year, I mean, he played well, but ultimately the Seahawks just weren't good enough. They just weren't good enough as a team. So, uh, at least to make a deep run into the playoffs, which is ultimately what they were going for. And they played in a pretty tough division, especially because the Rams bounced back in a huge way. Um, but yeah, so we got Geno Smith, Sam Howell backing him up. Great trade for the Seahawks because Sam Howell has shown some flashes of being able to play in the NFL. The Commanders did everything they could to destroy his confidence, but I don't know. And it wouldn't be the Seahawks if we did not mention their offensive line and the struggles at that position. I know they've invested in it with Cross and Lucas, but still, they haven't been able to find many solutions there. But one thing that does uh, one of the top five most interesting like coaching storylines of the season. I'm very interested to see how Grubb does coming over from UW, just up the road, because this Seahawks team could very well be a juggernaut if all goes well, and it's shown that Ryan Grubb carries over his philosophy from UW to Seattle, and he is able to make use of DK, Lockett, JSN, Fant, Charbonnet, and Kenneth Walker, especially in the passing game. But my question is, how does this team look with real modern offensive philosophy? Because with Pete Carroll, they've honestly had a backwards offensive philosophy. And Pete Carroll, he's not the coach that, everybody thought he was when they traded away Russell Wilson. He's not a guy who the game just completely passed by. But ultimately, he still did have a very old school approach. And now we're going to get some modernity with Seattle. So another one that this team has great weapons. This team has, make no mistake about it, Justin Jefferson is one of the game's best. Jordan Addison, I kind of was expecting him to show a little more on film last year. Like, yeah, he statistically had a good year, but sixth most routes run in the league and still finished under 1,000 yards. I don't even know how that's possible, especially when Justin Jefferson was not playing for a large part of the year. But this team got rid of Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins moved on. He went to Atlanta, which is really, really unfortunate because honestly, I thought Kirk Cousins was probably their best shot of the Super Bowl, but they did draft J.J. McCarthy. And even though I wasn't a fan of J.J. McCarthy as a prospect, I'm not stupid. I'm not delusional. I know that going to a Kevin O'Connell offense is going to be very good for his development. But yeah, so this is a team, unfortunately, that's playing in a very tough division, and they were starting Sam Darnold as QB1 week one probably, while they let McCarthy develop, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to ask yourself, how much does a downgrade at quarterback hurt this offense? Jefferson is QB proof, and Hawk, I don't know if he's going to be ready week one because he tore his ACL really late in the year, but hopefully the run game is pretty good too. I know Tyler Chandler looked really good last year, but they did sign Aaron Jones in free agency, and Brandon Powell did show some last year. They did lose KJ Osborne in free agency, but yeah, as you can see, this team was pretty good passing the ball last year, even with turmoil and chaos at the position, especially after Cousins tore his Achilles rest up. Um, I just don't really know what my expectations are for this team. My expectations are pretty low, especially given the quarterback position struggles and the division. This is a team, they're headed in the right direction, no doubt about it. When you have a transcendent talent like Justin Jefferson, you're always going to be in the mix. But unfortunately, Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy is not a QB tandem that excites me for 2024. So then we get into the Jaguars, and okay, you just paid Trevor Lawrence a lot of money. You probably paid him too much money, but it's time for him to step up, and that's ultimately the X factor on this team. I'm not going to waste any time talking about that. That's the elephant in the room. You're still paying for his potential, and you're still paying for what you think he could become. His rookie year, I'm not going to hold that against him, but he is not the quarterback that he was promised to be. Like, I think everybody can agree with that. I actually thought it was ludicrous that Trevor Lawrence was pegged as good as prospect as he was, because in 2020, I literally made a video on my channel where I said that Trevor Lawrence, he had regressed from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 at Clemson. So with a quarterback that's regressing every year, why are we comparing him to Andrew Luck? Joe Burrow, in my opinion, the guy who got drafted the year before, absolutely wiped the floor with Lawrence as a prospect. And I didn't think Lawrence was the best quarterback in this draft. I thought it was I thought it was Zach Wilson, but either way, I just wasn't excited about Lawrence entering the NFL, at least not as excited about him entering the NFL as I was, um, some of those other great QB prospects. I'm more excited about Caleb, was more excited about Burrow. But ultimately, he can still be a very good quarterback. In 2022, he played his ass off, and the Jaguars looked incredible. They looked incredible at parts of the year, and they looked really good this year. But then it all just fell apart. And yes, part of that was due to Trevor Lawrence getting hurt, but everything else around him became unscathed, like unraveled. And unfortunately, a lot of the parts that became unraveled are still there. The O line. I believe they're returning all 5 of their starters. Who is their offensive play caller? It's either going to be Press Taylor or Doug Peterson. It was Press Taylor last year, and I can only watch so many screens to Jamal Agnew before I don't know. But this is time, since T-Law has a lot of defenders in the media, and he has a lot of people in the community saying he sucks, this is the time for him to step up. He could either be a mini Justin Herbert or I don't know what the other side of that coin is. But yeah. So as far as who I think the priority weapons are for this offense, Evan Ingram, I have it number 1 because he absolutely terrorized opposing defenses last year. I believe he got close to 150 targets, which is insane for a tight end. Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, they drafted Brian Thomas Jr., who I'm expecting big things from. I expect him, he's definitely more talented than Kirk and or Gabe Davis, but we may have to wait a little bit because rookie wide receivers typically, take a little bit to adjust to the NFL. It's gotten better in the past few years. We've had some pretty insane prospects since the 2020 draft in particular, and rookie wide receivers do seem to adapt faster. But yeah, don't know how ETN's going to be used in the receiving game either, but we'll see about that. The Cardinals. This team, if you guys remember how everybody viewed Arizona last year, you'll know that people were expecting them to get the first overall pick and the second overall pick from Houston. So this team is definitely not as hopeless as we originally thought, and they really revitalized their offense with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride emerging. So yeah, I am really excited about the Arizona Cardinals. Once again, they play in an extremely tough division, but Kyler Murray, he showed that he can ball. I was really worried about Kyler Murray last season, but he played some incredible football once he was able to come back from his injury. So yeah, big ups to Kyler Murray. I'll admit I was wrong about you. Yeah, so Kyler Murray, I hope you guys bought the dip. Still, as far as the offensive line, I don't really know how it's going to rank. I know they did draft Paris Johnson, but I don't know. This team plays very hard for Gannon. They gave me early, Dan Campbell Lions vibes where you knew that they just didn't have enough talent to win, but they were going to make it very hard for you to do so. So, regarding the Arizona Cardinals, I'm expecting big things next year. I think that they're going to throw the ball a lot. I think they're going to finally realize that handing the ball off to 29-year-old James Conner 80 times a game is not going to be what gets them success. And they just added one of the best wide receiver prospects the league has ever seen. So I'm really excited. I'd be really excited if I was a Cardinals fan for what that offense is going to look like. And by the way, you have one of the game's young premier tight ends as well. So yeah, good on you, Arizona Cardinals fans. I don't know. So with the Indianapolis Colts, there's something we need to talk about. Anthony Richardson has one of the highest. So with the Colts, there's something that we need to talk about. Anthony Richardson has one of the highest ceilings in the NFL. But the problem is his completion percentage throughout his careers in college, it's been very low. And his completion percentage last year, I believe, was also very, very low for standards of an NFL quarterback. And he does have an ungodly ceiling. I think that if you want to make a smart bet for MVP, you should bet on Anthony Richardson because he'll probably give you the most bang for your buck as far as odds. And it's just Jalen Hurts 2022 all over again. Like, I don't see how people don't see this because he's being, coached by Shane Steichen, the guy who coached Hurts in 2022. And you have Michael Pittman playing the A.J. Brown role, and you'll have Josh Downs and A.D. Mitchell playing the Devontae Smith role. Now, granted, neither of those guys are as good as Devontae Smith, but still, you need to respect at least how uh, they are as pass catchers and how good they can be in Shane Steichen's offense. Jonathan Taylor, again, uh, Jonathan Taylor, as far as his rushing, it's probably the second, third priority in this offense, but he's still going to get his work in the passing game too. Even though Anthony Richardson is a mobile quarterback, I do think he's going to check down quite a bit. So yeah, or at least not quite a bit, but because ultimately tuck and run will still work for him. But I don't know. Anthony Richardson, he got a lot of rushing touchdowns last year. Will he get the passing volume and will he take the steps forward as a passer to support what we think he can do? I hope so, and I hope that he does throw the ball a lot next year, this upcoming year, because he did have that shoulder injury. Yeah, those are my expectations for the Colts next year. The Baltimore Ravens. I know that people are going to be like, why do you have the Ravens this low? Well, listen, I respect Lamar as a passer. He is a great passer. He is not somebody who you just make him be with his arm and he can't do it. He can absolutely do it. He was the MVP for a reason. I've loved watching his career arc ever since he was at Louisville, but this is a team that has never really had to throw the ball at will, so I don't know. Lamar, he does have that crazy game in the air every now and then, but ultimately, this is still a team that doesn't pass for a lot of yards. As you could see, even last year during Lamar's MVP year, he still only passed for 212 yards per game. Um, and with the Ravens, they did lose three guys on the offensive line, so I don't know what their passing game is going to look like. I don't know what their pass protection is going to look like. But Todd Monken came over from Georgia. He's going to find some creative ways to use Mark Andrews like he did Brock Bowers. He's going to find some creative ways to use Zay Flowers like he did Ladd McConkey. And yeah, with other guys like Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, and Derrick Henry now on this team, I just don't really see the need for the Ravens to, throw the ball at will. And yeah, so how are the Ravens going to fare after losing three starters? I don't know. But Zay Flowers is really, really good wide receiver one. So that's a name to keep an eye on for a guy who could cement himself into maybe top 10 or 15 receivers in this league by the time the year is over. Absolutely loved him. Great man coverage beater. Yeah, so with the Chargers, this is another one we're going to start with the X Factor first because the Chargers, Herbert has been perennially disrespected, not only by NFL media circles, but by people in the community who say that he can't, that he's been able to that he's been unable to get it done. And it's just not fair. It's just not fair because he's had nothing around him. He's dealt with Brandon Staley for 3 years of his career, and he's ultimately somebody who is probably one of the few game changing quarterbacks still. And Greg Roman is their offensive coordinator. I don't know what their identity is going to look like, but this team has had some laughable pass catching weapons. They've had Keenan Allen and what else? The Quentin Johnston pick looks like an absolute disaster to this point. Lad McConkey, you needed to draft him, and he's already the best wide receiver on the roster. I do like Palmer, but he's best suited as a wide receiver 3, not a 2, and definitely not a 1. But yeah, so yeah, with their tight end situation, they also have Will Dissly. I don't really know how he's going to look, but I don't know. We'll see how the Chargers do next year. The Browns with Deshaun Watson. Oh man, I don't think he's ever going to be good again because he took too much time off of football, and obviously there's everything going on around him to the point where it's really affecting his play. It's really affecting his play. I can't say I feel bad for the guy at all. Like, bro, fully guaranteed deal even after all that bullshit. Yeah, no, give me a break. But so Deshaun Watson, their QB1 going into next year, going to be throwing to Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman. I was going to put David Bell here, but I don't know. David Bell mentioned would have been crazy. Um, so Stefanski, what does he like to do? He likes to run the ball, and they still have Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb is on the wrong side of his 20s, and he's also in the twilight of his career. He's never really been a highly explosive pass catcher either. So my expectations for Nick Chubb, as far as catching in this offense, they are non-existent. I don't expect anything out of any of the Browns running backs. They actually all looked pretty bad last year outside of Nick Chubb, and I know Jerome Ford had a few good games, but I don't know. It just wasn't it. But good offensive line. Like I said, Stefanski really likes to establish the run, but yeah. So with throwing to Jerry Jeudy, who they gave like a 3-year, $60 million contract to, I have no idea why they did that. Jerry Jeudy very well could find his role in the Cleveland Browns because he's not best used as a slot receiver. I don't know why people do. He's a boom bust outside deep threat, which it's definitely not what he was supposed to be when he was coming out of Alabama. But at the end of 2022, when he was used that way, he did have some success. So, yeah. And Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman, I don't know. I don't really know what either of those guys are. Cedric Tillman's a developmental receiver, but Amari Cooper, he'll have his 5 or 6 games next year where he's absolutely non-existent, and then he'll have his 2 or 3, 200-yard games and make up for it, and his season average will look about the same. It'll look like, I don't know, 1,100 yards, and yeah. David Njoku, this is a guy who really came on strong at the end of last year. He looked very, very good, and honestly, with Deshaun Watson, it's only going to look better. With the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm sorry that cut off at the bottom, but yeah. So this is one where I'm still in the silver tier, by the way. If you've been keeping track since, I believe, 20 or 19, this is one giant tier, and it continues to 10. So with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield played unbelievable last year. I cannot wait to see him play again this year because he's been one of my favorite players ever since he came out of Oklahoma. And the 2018 draft in particular is nostalgic for me because it's the first one I really, really followed as a fan. I remember I was a junior in high school. It was, I don't know, the Broncos were really bad that year, so I got a head start on looking at the prospects, and I really wanted Baker Mayfield, but he got taken first overall. But Baker in particular to me is just a guy who's really nostalgic. I really respect him. I love what he's been able to do in Tampa Bay. I've loved that he's been able to prove people wrong. And now with Liam Cohen, my one concern is that Dave Canales has left. He's gone to your division rival, the Carolina Panthers. But when you're throwing to Mike Evans, who is by far a first ballot lock Hall of Famer at this point, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, Kate Otten, Rashad White, Bucky Irving, and Jalen McMillan. this is a pretty good team, and they continue to just overperform. I don't know what it is. I don't know if the Brady effect is still running rampant on this roster, but this team, they just always seem to perform. And my X factor is, how does Bucky Irving change their offense philosophy? Because this is a team that has had really, really, really anemic run games over the past 5, 6 years, besides when they went on that playoff run in 2020 with playoff Lenny and Rojo. But I don't know. How does Bucky Irving change their philosophy? I'm not entirely sure. So, with the Buffalo Bills, I know that people are going to be like, what? You were smoking crack having them down here at 13. Hear me out. They have taken an approach to where I don't know if their passing game is going to be as strong as it used to be because, one, they are going to try to preserve the shelf life of Josh Allen. And the way you can do that is by not making him, A, throw the ball 50 times a game, and B, not making him throw his body at linebackers in the red zone. And as soon as Joe Brady took over last year, they were winning, but they were winning in a different way than they had previously. They were using James Cook more. He had been more involved in the offense. And I think this team is going to rely on their run game a little more, especially because they traded away Stephon Diggs. Trading away Stephon Diggs was a great move for the Buffalo Bills. I just really don't like what he has to offer to the team. I don't really like his attitude. And ultimately, this is a team that their offensive line was ranked 8th. Uh, I think that's a little high, but O-line experts, you let me know. Joe Brady. So, once again, when, oh God, he's skipping my mind. Oh yeah, Dorsey got fired in the middle of last year. This team, once again, they were winning, but they were winning in different ways, and the offense philosophy changed. I remember he got fired against them on uh, after the Monday night disaster against the Broncos. So, yeah. So with Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Dawson Knox, basically that's what's going on. That's the weapons that Josh Allen has to throw to, and honestly, it's gotten pretty weak. Dalton Kincaid is the number one. Kincaid mentioned, I believe he can take that next step forward, but compared to what some other quarterbacks have to work with in the AFC, this is not a good group of weapons, and honestly, I thought they should have drafted. Oh my God, I forgot Keon Coleman. I completely forgot Keon Coleman too. What is wrong with me? I forgot Troy Franklin and Keon Coleman. Um, but yeah, they should have gone more heavy at the position in the draft. But they're doing what the Chiefs have done. They're doing okay. We're assembling. I mean, the Chiefs have had a bunch of scrubs over the past few years, but the Chiefs have just assembled a bunch of scrubs and they all play a specific role rather than, like every down players. And that's completely fine, but a lot is riding on Kincaid, on those three guys in particular, Kincaid, Samuel, and Shakir. You just are basically praying that they can hold down the four as top three weapons on your team. And with the Atlanta Falcons, this is a team where I think I'm optimistic for where they're headed because bringing in Zach Robinson by Raheem Morris, it was a great move. It was a great move because I think the Falcons are going to be better next year. And I think that we're going to finally see what they thought they were getting in London, Pitts, and Bijan. I think we're going to finally see it materialize because there is almost nothing worse than Desmond Ritter and Marcus Mariota and Taylor Heineke and whoever they were dealing with at quarterback. I feel really bad for London, Pitts, and Bijan for what they had to go through. And this team did draft Michael Penix 8th overall. Yeah, they did draft Michael Penix 8th overall. I get why they did it. Definitely not a fan of the quarterback, so I don't know. We'll just see where that goes. But the priority weapons for this team are London, Pitts, Bijan, Mooney, Algier, and I threw in a Rondo mention because why not? And I do have a concern with, are they going to be able to support a post Achilles tear Cousins, or and is he going to be able to support Atlanta's weapons? Because I think he can. He's been one of the highest volume passers in the NFL over the past few years. He has been a good player. He's kind of been like the watered down version of Dak Prescott, even though I think Dak Prescott's numbers, if I'm not mistaken, are a little more crazy than Kirk Cousins. But that's a guy who he has played very well throughout this point in his career. And is he going to win you the big game? I think he's done a better job shedding that label recently than in the past, but still the Vikings have gone pretty much close to nowhere. Nowhere close to the NFC Championship they got to when uh, they were, they had that incredible run with Case Keenum, but still, team with a pretty good offensive line. So all the ingredients are there for this team to be pretty good next year. And Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson and Kirk Cousins, there is a lot riding on you. Terry Fontenot might get fired if this team falls short of what we think they're going to be again. So once again, this is the last team in the silver tier. I'm sure you're tired of seeing every team in the silver tier, but I could literally see any team finishing, within, anywhere from 11 to 19. So the Chicago Bears. Normally when you have a rookie quarterback drafted first overall, they're going to a trash team with a trash offensive line, trash defense. Not the case with Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. And this is a situation that I think a lot of teams would be, not only killing to be in, like, wow, a situation where you could draft Caleb Williams and, someone else at 9th overall after your team had been mid to end the year, not completely terrible like it was to start the year. But on the flip side of that, if you mismanage it and you completely screw it up, then you're going to get fired. And Justin Fields, there were an embarrassing number of Bears fans in my comment section months ago that were just like, Justin Fields, Justin Fields, Justin Fields. I made a video saying that he sucked and he's just not it. And I don't know. I don't know why the Fields defenders are still out there, because you just got one of the best quarterback prospects, in my opinion, since Burrow. And before that, since Luck. So I have never met fans of a team that have been so sad to get one of the best QB prospects ever. And this is a team with a good offensive line too. I know that people are going to be like, well, they haven't invested a lot. That's wrong. They've done a complete overhaul onto the group, and I really like what they've done. And Waldron, he's coming over from the Seattle Seahawks. He got 30 touchdowns out of Geno, who everybody thought was washed, and now we have Caleb with a good offensive line, with a defense that should be much improved. And now he's going to be throwing to DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, a great wide receiver prospect in Romo Dunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, and Gerald Everett. My only question for this team, my only concern for this team is, one, you play in the NFC North, and you're going to play in some bad weather. But two, how quickly does this team come together? How quickly do these guys come together? Because this team looks really, really good on paper. But it's another thing when they have to look good on the field. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'd be really excited if I was a Bears fan. But still, this is the first year, so maybe temper your expectations. But the sky is the limit for this team heading forward. The future is very bright in Chicago. So number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the first team of gold tier. And had they not ended the past year so poorly, I probably would have put them a little higher. But ultimately, Hurts, it remains to be seen if he's still like that high value passer. Because we know how he is as a rusher. We know how he is in the red zone. And he's not just a, tush-push merchant. He actually is legitimately a rushing threat. So we know how he is with his legs. But he's still inconsistent as a passer, at least at points. But he does have a good offensive line. And obviously, they have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and they added Saquon Barkley. And one of the things I'm wondering is Kellen Moore going to be better for the Philadelphia Eagles than Brian Johnson? I hope he is, because Kellen Moore has been one of the scapegoats in Dallas and with the Chargers for why they have ultimately just failed on the offensive side of the ball. And even though I don't think that's fair or true, he is absorbing a lot of the blame. So yeah. So we have the Eagles. They've completely revamped everything I thought they needed to revamp. They've revamped their secondary. They've added a couple corners, and I don't think they're going to be as high scoring of games next year, especially since Saquon Barkley behind that offensive line is going to be pretty good. But I do still expect them to be one of the best teams in the league. Even though I have them at 10 here, don't get it mistaken. I do think that they are still probably one of the top 3 offenses on this list in general. Green Bay Packers. This team ended the year very, very solid. And why? I have them ranked above the Eagles is I'm just more confident in Philadelphia to establish the run uh, than the Packers. I do think the Packers are going to need to throw more, but I also think the Packers are just going to be that much more efficient. Just because Jordan Love, he ended the year so well last year. And, we have Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. We're going to be throwing to a lot of weapons. And Matt LaFleur, he deserves a lot of praise for what he was able to do with this Packers team. They finished, or the preseason ranking for the offensive line was 14th because, once again, I feel like that was a little low just because, we're so used to seeing Green Bay materialize into a good team with a good offensive line, but ultimately, still they've gotten a lot younger at all five positions, at least in the past few years. So yeah, uh, there are a lot of guys on this team, and my X factor is who stands out in this crowded skill position room because you have Jaden Reed, uh, a guy who was great in screens and short yardage situations last year, and jet sweeps and all that. He was kind of a gadget player, and he did that very, very well. Christian Watson, deep threat, boomer bust. I don't really know if he can play real wide receiver, but he did get a lot of targets in the red zone. So yeah, that does make me feel better about him. Romeo Doubs, another guy who scored a lot of touchdowns last year. And a lot of wide receiver gurus out there on the internet they swear that Dontavian Wicks is the best one, and he very well could be. But Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, also guys at the tight end position that they were rookies last year, but they really showed out. And ultimately, I think Kraft is dealing with a knee injury, but still, Luke Musgrave, and I'm expecting him to have a big year this year. The only concern about Green Bay and the ability to throw the ball is that obviously there's going to be a lot of bad weather games, but they do play some. I don't know. They do play in a couple domes here and there, so we'll just see how it goes late into the season. But yeah, Jordan Love is still a relative unproven commodity. But even though he finished the last year pretty strong, but as far as the running back room, they do still have Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, and I see no reason why those guys shouldn't be included in priority weapons in the passing game either. Oh yeah, um, this video is getting a little long. Oh well, if you stuck with me to this point, then thank you very much. I appreciate you. So the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud, he played phenomenal last year. He probably broke everybody's expectations. Even the biggest Stroud truthers probably didn't see this coming. So we have C.J. Stroud and uh, Davis Mills. I don't know why, guys. It's 2 a.m. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for blanking on so many names. But C.J. Stroud, he played incredible last year. Granted, a lot of his really good performances only came in 4 or so games. There are 4 games that really stick out to me with Stroud. In particular, the games against the Steelers and the Buccaneers. Those games are really what I think about when I think about C.J. Stroud. But Bobby Slowick did a great job with this team. D'Amico Ryans did a great job with this team. And this team is definitely in the up and up, and they have a real Super Bowl window. So Stroud could very well lead the league in passing, and I wouldn't be surprised. But we just need a little more consistency from him, and then we'll be golden. Now, he's going to be throwing to Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon, and John Mechie. I thought about throwing Noah Brown in there, but I'm like, eh. So, Nico Collins, I believe, is the number one, just because he has the least questions around him, and I just like his profile the best. He's a big body X receiver who can separate, and does it at a very high level. Everybody else has questions behind him. Besides Dalton Schultz, I think he's going to be great, but again, wide receivers 2 and 3 are oftentimes priorities over the number one tight end, even the number one tight end. So, Tank Dell, fractured fibula, not a good injury, especially for a position that relies so much on explosiveness, and especially for his play style. That revolves around him being a smaller dude and relying on that explosiveness to get open. So yeah, Tank Dell, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about him, but Stephon Diggs, there is a non-zero chance that Stephon Diggs is washed, and if there's all these weapons that he has to share the field with. How is he going to react to that? How is he going to react? Because at this point, I do believe Tank Dell is better than him. Maybe even Dalton Schultz at tight end. I think Dalton Schultz is a better tight end than Diggs as a wide receiver at this point in his career. Yeah, Dalton Schultz is going to be pretty safe as far as, projecting production. I know that Brevin Jordan there, but Dalton Schultz, he is definitely a good player. So Mixon and Mechie as well rounding out the offense. So yeah, non-zero chance that Diggs is completely washed. So last year was not a good year for the Cincinnati Bengals. They came in with Super Bowl expectations, and for one reason or another, they just couldn't get it done. Joe Burrow and Jake Browning. By the way, Browning, unbelievable backup. I cannot be more proud of how he played last year. He definitely deserves at least a chance to start somewhere if he doesn't get it this year. But so with the Cincinnati Bengals, we were dealing with Zach Taylor, who has fallen under a lot of criticism over the past few years. But listen, Zach Taylor, he has shown that coaches can improve. Coaches can improve just like players can improve. And with Joe Burrow, who is arguably a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the league when he's healthy, he is going to be throwing to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Jermaine Burton, which, by the way, that draft pick, absolutely unbelievable. I know that Cincinnati, over the past few years, they've really been trying to shed that label of the mid-2000s where, they were the team with the most arrests in the league, and they would just draft guys like Adam Jones and just ignore whatever was between their ears. But they did that again with Burton. This felt like a classic Bengals pick. I absolutely love it. So they have Mike Gesicki as well, Charlie Jones, Irwin, Yoshi Voss, and Zach Moss as well. And the only thing with the Cincinnati Bengals, the only concerns that I have are, does this group perform on the field? Because there have been a few times where the offensive line has just died. It's why they lost the AFC Championship the year before last. Then this past year, everything went wrong. I believe they finished 9-8, which that's honestly their floor. And in the AFC, I don't know if that gets you into the playoffs, but I do expect a bounce back here from Joe Burrow. They do play in a very tough division and a very tough conference in general, but I don't know. Cincinnati, I think you can get it done. I really think you can get it done, and I believe in Joe Burrow. Yeah. So Rams, Stafford just does not get enough love. As much love as Stafford gets, I believe he should get more because he has made superstars out of a lot of players. Cooper Kupp was not Cooper Kupp until Stafford came in. And Puka Nacua, once again, I don't know what Puka Nacua is going to look like, especially because Stafford and potentially McVay are on borrowed time in LA. But Puka Nacua set the rookie receiving record last year, which was so absurd. And I see no reason as to why this team is going to slow down. They added Blake Corum, they added Tutu Atwell, and the only questions that you have looking at the roster is what happens at tight end. Because Higbee, he tore his ACL, I believe, in the playoffs. Yeah, it was either in the playoffs or late into the season. I actually know he tore it against the Lions. I don't know. I was at work watching that game, but so yeah, I do think Davis Allen is going to emerge. He has a lot of the traits the Rams want. I know they tried to trade up for Brock Bowers and were not shy about doing so, but I don't know. Just remember that this team has a really good run blocking line, and yeah. So now we are in the platinum tier. Any of these next 5 teams I could see finishing first in the league as far as passing offense next year and passing efficiency. So if you'll notice, let's just skip right down to the weapons, the priority weapons. They have not extended Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb yet. I know that they're going to need to extend, or they're not going to need to extend, but Dak, CeeDee, and Parsons are all up for paydays, and Dak is the odd one out. It should be CeeDee and Parsons, but look at the priority weapons here. CeeDee, Cooks, Ferguson, CeeDee, Dowdle. Sorry, I just spoiled my next two. But CeeDee, Zeke, CeeDee, Deuce Vaughn, CeeDee. And what I'm wondering is, do the Cowboys throw the ball 600 times this season? And that's not a joke. The reason I'm wondering if that's what they're going to do in the offensive philosophy that they're going to go with is because they have nobody at running back. They have absolutely no one. And if Dak misses time this year, they're absolutely screwed because The two guys who make this offense function are Dak and CD. That's basically it. Yeah, I know people would probably be excited to see what Lance could do if he was able to get in there, but still, I don't know. I really don't know what I'm thinking about the Dallas Cowboys. And this team, I can already tell they're not going to go deep into the playoffs. If Mike McCarthy is your coach, you are not going to get anywhere in the playoffs. But this is a team that, some unforsaken NFC bottom feeder. They always come into Jerry World, and then the Cowboys hang up 40 on them. And that's going to happen this year, just because that's the identity of the team. That's what happens sometimes, or I don't know. It's just kind of weird that it happens a lot, multiple times a season. But yeah, so the Cowboys, they will have a good offense. There is nothing that I've seen that completely discourages me about this offense. They did add Tyler Guyton too to their offensive line. They did lose Tyron Smith though, which is unfortunate. But yeah, with the Miami Dolphins, now the only concern we have about the Miami Dolphins is can they overcome a big game and or bad weather syndrome? And also with the Miami Dolphins, they're a team who they honestly look better on the box score than they do on the field. At least that's how it was in the second half of the season because they were just throwing away games left and right. Like the Levis game, the game against Tennessee. Oh my God, I cannot believe they absolutely blew that game because if they win that game, they're probably the 2 seed and maybe playing against Baltimore for the number 1 seed in the conference. But I don't know. I just don't know. But regardless, Tua is going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL soon, and I believe that is a colossal mistake. Just because he can't win in big game, he also can't win in bad weather, and that is the number one thing. If they want to shed any of these labels, then Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa have to prove that they can go into Kansas City or Buffalo and they can win that important game late into the year to elevate them. It might be the difference between winning the division and finishing as a wild card again. Because if you win literally a handful of games last year, any of them were winnable instead of the actual outcome, then you are, yeah, you're the division winner. You're the AFC East winner for a division that's been dominated by Buffalo in recent memory. But regardless, PFF offensive line ranking 18th. Once again, I thought that was a little generous compared to what we had to see at the beginning of last year. But Mike McDaniel, one of the premier young offensive play callers in the league, and I know that a lot of people were, questioning as to if his seat could be hot. And my answer to that is maybe. Like, I think it'd be dumb if they were to let him go, but he has built something special. Him and Chris Greer are definitely on the same page as far as what they want. Priority weapons in this order: Tyreek, Waddle, and I threw both their running backs as, third and fourth priorities in this offense just because of how big of a role they have in the passing game with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. So they did also sign Jonnu Smith and they did draft Malik Washington. They also, brought back Berrios. So I don't know. We'll just see what this looks like. We'll see what this looks like. They were, I believe, Tua led the league in passing yards last year, which is pretty good. But yeah, so the Chiefs. This team, before we get into, let's get into the elephant in the room. Yeah, I know that a lot of you are probably surprised to not see them at number 1, but last year they had some bad offensive performances. I'm talking like miserable offensive performances. And, it was due to a number of reasons, but mainly due to the fact that Mahomes, he was playing with Walmart cashiers. Oh, and by the way, if you want to feel demoralized, they had nothing at wide receiver and won back-to-back Super Bowls, and now they added Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Now, the only thing to talk about here is that they do have a new backup. No longer is it Chad Henne. They added Carson Wentz, and they still have a good offensive line. Creed Humphrey, Joe Tooney, and Trey Smith. It's probably a crumble-proof interior, but you do have questions at the bookends. But my only question is how do Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown revitalize the offense? Because last year they were throwing, like, I think Mahomes' ADOT was like 5. They were not throwing downfield because they couldn't throw downfield because teams were just playing too high safety shell. And then Mahomes was like, all right. So he kind of low-key became a check down merchant. And it did, playing too high, I guess it's a way you can slow down the Chiefs. You can slow down Andy Reid. But yeah. So as far as their offense and what they look like heading into next year, yeah, that's basically all we have to discuss. And number 2 with Detroit. So, Jared Goff has had an incredible, incredible career arc because he's gone from an afterthought in the Rams to a guy who has become a really well respected quarterback and probably a top 10 quarterback or at least top 12, 13 quarterback at this point, which there's nothing wrong with that. Um, he's played absolutely unbelievable since he's been in Detroit, and he's a big reason as far as why that culture was able to turn around in the way it did under Dan Campbell. But yeah, so best offensive line in the league, along with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jameer Gibbs, Jameson Williams, and David Montgomery. And the X factor for this team is Jameson Williams. Is never going to happen because Jameson Williams has had some really, really discouraging data that proves that he might not be able to play in this league. And honestly, it's not something that anybody should be ashamed of. It's not anything that he should feel bad about because I know that there was a lot of circumstantial stuff that is surrounding him that might not be easy for him to deal with. But I don't know, especially because he tore his ACL in 2022. But yeah, so this is a team that's going to put up a lot of points. They play in a dome. Obviously, that's going to help. They play I don't know, they play a really, really awesome brand of football. And, I really hope that they can finally get what they deserve. And so, with the number one team, the number one passing offense in the league, in my opinion, heading into 2024, we have the San Francisco 49ers. And you can say whatever you want about Brock Purdy, but the reality is this team never looked the way it did, the way it looks under Brock Purdy when they were starting Jimmy Garoppolo every week. They look absolutely incredible. And with skill position weapons like Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, who they just drafted in the first round, and Jawan Jennings. Yeah, uh, that's the best offense in the league, in my opinion, especially when it's being called by Kyle Shanahan. You could say whatever you want about his big game fiasco, and honestly, he is a choker. He has not shed that label yet, and I hope he does get the chance to shed that label. But he could still run an offense like no other. Any team that comes into Santa Clara on any given Sunday could just get absolutely punished and absolutely obliterated by the San Francisco 49ers. So, with the 49ers, I do have a few concerns. Their offensive line, if Purdy has a second or two longer in a couple plays during the Super Bowl, we're talking about an entirely different game. The 49ers, they completely lost that Super Bowl. They just handed it to the Chiefs on a silver platter. And one of the guys who was wide open during the Super Bowl was Brandon Ayuk. He was low-key giving Snead the work. And the fact that Brandon Ayuk could no longer be on the San Francisco 49ers, even though it always just ends up getting done, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't really know what to think. But regardless, yeah, so as far as the teams I had in platinum tier, I have the Cowboys, Dolphins, Chiefs, and Lions. And let me just know what you guys think. If you made it this far, if you stuck around with me this far to this point, then I'm really grateful for you and thank you for sticking with me. I know it's 2:45 a.m. by the time I finish recording this, so yeah. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Thank you for sticking out this long, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.